Hello, and welcome back to the Your Everyday Strength podcast. My name is Josh Sternberg, and if you're just joining me for the first time, welcome. Thank you very much for being here. If you are returning, also welcome. Thank you very much for being here. Today's episode, we do have Dr. Daniel Kirkbride, and I'm going to let him take the floor. Hit it.
Hey mate, thanks for having me. Good to be back after a long hiatus. But yeah, thanks for having me. I'm an osteopath originally, strength coach, and now work in the functional medicine space. So looking forward to diving into some chats today on recovery and all things longevity.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so Mr. Daniel and myself, we actually have known each other for quite a long time now. And funnily enough, I've spoken about it a few times on the podcast in relation to coming up as a PT, starting out in the industry, different ways to go about it, further education and things like that. And the first ever mentorship that I actually did was with Dan.
First one. The mentorship virginity taken.
Yep. Yeah. So it was that would have been, was it 2020 to the 2019?
Nah, I didn't start. 2020 or 2021. I think you were like the very first or second intake. Yeah, that was a while back, man. Time flies.
Yeah, pretty sure I was actually part of that first intake from memory.
You were still at uni?
Sick. I was, yes. So it was a very long time ago now.
You jumped to the call without a shirt on, smashing some food.
That's right. And everyone in the group calls used to fucking call me out because I'd always have a shirt off no matter what. Every time I was in the call, I had no shirt on. I have a shirt on today.
I'm surprised. You and me both.
We're scaling. We're scaling in business, in life. I have to look somewhat professional now, so I always just have a random shirt sitting by the desk ready to go in case I need to jump on and start to speak to a camera.
No pants on underneath, just got business on top.
Nah, it's like those memes that we saw through COVID where everyone was in lockdown, so they just worked from home and they had pajamas on and a business shirt or some shit like that.
Oh yeah, that was me on some of the Zoom calls.
Hey, I don't blame that. It was me on most of the calls. So as Dan said, we're going to jump in today and have a little bit of a chat. Essentially, the premise around this episode is about to be the science of recovery. We're going to be discussing things in relation to longevity, recovery tools, a few little biomarkers and health data information that can help everybody who's listening at home to make some better, more educated, informed decisions, and also maybe just open up the lens of what actually else is out there, because I know from a very base level sort of look at the world, you go to a doctor, you say, I've got XYZ occurring, and they just give you a pill and say, see you later, have a great day. They might send you for some blood tests if you're real lucky, and then they'll say, you're in range and off you trot, see you later. And you'll find out that you're actually at the bottom of the range and shit's just not functioning. So decided to enlist Dan's help to discuss all of this stuff today. Take it away, my friend. Kick us off. Where do the people need to start? What is it that they start with?
In terms of what specifically?
In terms of if they were to start to experience either maybe symptoms that persist for a long period of time that they're just a little bit sick of. So they're a little bit tired all the time, or they've got brain fog all the time, or there's just these little tidbits of stuff that you would probably see people come to you with more often than not, that just start to get to a point where they're like, hey, this isn't nothing's fixing this. Like, I've cleaned up my diet, I'm trying to sleep better, I'm drinking my water. It's like, what? They're like, oh, I'm doing all the things I'm told to be doing. Where do I go from here? Yeah,
I mean, that's the exact sentence I hear probably 10 times a week. So super common. Exactly what people say. I'm trying everything. So I think my first it's not advice, but like first hurdle I always say to people in that situation be like, number one, are you doing all the foundations right? So you sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night sleep? Are you are you consuming enough calories? You're not under eating, overtraining, you're recovering properly, you're getting sunlight, you're doing all the right things. So if you are doing all those right things, or you think you're doing the right things and the needle's not moving forward, then obviously there's something missing. So I think that's the first thing. A lot of people, when they come see me, they're like, oh, I'm doing all the right things. It's like, clearly something's missing though. You're either not doing the right things or you're doing the right things and there's something missing or hidden that you're not consciously aware of. So the first thing is we have to figure out, oh, what's the potential roadblock that you're not aware of? And the best way to do that is going to be through a blood test. And that's why I'm pretty passionate about getting a blood test done. So first thing you should be doing if you're that person in that situation, I think everyone should be taking a blood test at least 2 times a year. So like minimum every 6 months, you should be getting the blood test, in the same sense of, you take your car for a service every 10,000 kilometers and you proactively try and prevent your car from breaking down so you don't have a $10,000 bill when you go see your mechanic next time. We obviously try and avoid that. It's a lot cheaper to pay $200 every 10,000 Ks than it is to pay $10,000 for a broken car. So same thing with your body. Pay $200 for a blood test. Pay for your own blood test. My feedback, if you can actually afford to pay for your own blood test, and it might sound harsh, but I'd say $7 for coffee. If you didn't buy 30 coffees in that 6-month period, there's your blood test. So like everyone should be able to get themselves a good quality blood test. If you can do that twice a year, $200 for a really comprehensive metabolic panel from somewhere like iScreen or iMedical, you're going to always be one step ahead with your health, and you're going to have quality data where you can compare and contrast where your health is now, where it was 6 months ago, and you're constantly evolving and making sure you stay on top of it. So that'd be the first piece of advice. Where that usually falls down, unfortunately, is like you said, where people say, I've gone to see a doctor and I've had these symptoms, I don't feel normal, I've got brain fog, bloating, I can't focus, got poor energy, poor recovery, things that aren't normal, or things that, obviously you're not performing at your peak. So you go see the doctor and you tell them these things and you get a blood test, and usually the blood test is pretty poor. They don't measure a lot of markers, which is why I say pay for your own, because getting a blood test with 70% of the pieces missing is like trying to solve a puzzle with 30% of the pieces. You can't really understand what's going on. So the first thing is you have to get a good quality blood test, which is why I say take your health into your own hands and just buy the proper blood test. Second thing is then, unfortunately, and this is no shade to GPs, GPs are great, medical system's great, in a sense of what is the medical system designed to do? It's designed to help you in medical emergencies. If I cut my arm off, I get hit by a car, I have a severe infection, I'm going to see a doctor, I'm going to go to a hospital, I'm going to take antibiotics, I'm going to get surgery, and it's all amazing. Yeah, so it's not shade on the medical system or doctors, but what it's not so great at is solving these lower grade, strange symptoms that we can't seem to figure out, the ones I just mentioned before. Yeah. And with that, general practitioners only study blood work a total of 4 weeks at uni throughout their entire degree, and nutrition I think is like 8 weeks. So it's like they're not really the expert you would see when it comes to how do I proactively solve these health concerns and how do I be the most optimal version of myself from a longevity perspective. So for that reason, it's really important. So when you do get your blood test, you go and see someone, whether it's someone like me or there's other people that do really great work as well. Coach Jake Dollarshell, Dave O'Brien, there's lots of guys in Australia who also do very good work here. But getting someone who compares you against the optimal, or like what is healthy versus comparing you against what is average, is going to make a game changer, a difference. And it's going to be the difference between, you experiencing that situation where you see the doctor and you get told everything's normal and you're kind of confused and scratching your head, versus you go see someone like me and you're like, oh, here's a bunch of reasons why you are experiencing that. And now you have something tangible so you can actually make some changes to your lifestyle beyond the basics of sleep, nutrition, and hydration. So that's the key. You want to get the more specific you can be with your assessment, the more specific the diagnostics, the more specific the interventions, the more specific and better the outcomes. And then we just rinse and repeat that process every 6 months if there's no problems. If there is a problem, you want to be assessing that more frequently. So we'll be getting our bloods taken every 3 months, because same as powerlifting, you write a program at the end of the block, review it. Is it good? Am I progressing? Am I not progressing? Do I change it? You don't just follow a program for 12 months and like, let's hope that it works. Like, you want to be having some checkpoints and getting data and feedback to then understand if you're moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a couple of dudes that you mentioned within there, Jake, David, etc. I've followed those guys for basically as long as I can remember now, for exactly that, because as you mentioned, like GPs are great at what they do. GP, general practitioner, that's very generalized. I honestly didn't even realize it was that little of study that they actually do, like with the blood work and the nutrition stuff. It does make sense. I've had some interesting recommendations from doctors about nutrition, and when I've had bloods done and my testosterone was at 6 when I was 24, and the dude's like, oh yeah, sweet, no, that's all good, man, no worries, even though the bottom range is 10, and I was a 24-year-old male who weight trained and 110 kilos and all of this. I was like, there's something not right here, but that's okay. Like, that's not okay. But say that again.
So quick one on that. The normal range is 10. In the optimal ranges, it's 24. That's
There you go.
massive.
Yes.
Big thing again when it comes to comparing against average reference ranges to optimal. Because if you came to see me, 24 to 31 total test, free test 4 to 600. GP reference ranges 10 to who even knows, 10 to 40 or do something massive, and then their free test is anything below 200 gets flagged. So it's like that's a massive discrepancy in terms of being told you're normal versus being told that, hey, that's a bit low, let's be proactive and do something about it.
Well, that actually leads perfectly into my next question: is within Australia, or even around the world, is there any specific course or any specific thing that you can actually do to learn about this? Like yourself, have you just learned off of mentors? Is there courses? Is there, because there's no specific like certification that you can get, like you can get, you can go and get a bachelor's degree, whatever, etc., etc. But how is it that you've come across the deep dive of all of this information, the optimal ranges, etc.?
I mean, I'm just, you probably know this already, I'm just a massive nerd and I love learning. I've probably done every course you can think of under the sun, mentorship, mentor. So, I mean, that's not useful feedback, I guess. But like that's been my journey, has been, I guess, I started off, like, I have done health studies, biomedical studies. So it's like, I went personal trainer, then went, did osteopathic studies where it was like, obviously we study a lot of biology, physiology, immunology, pharmacology, toxicology, we learn about all this stuff. So like I've done all that as a base. So then I guess if you have the base, like my philosophy, whether we're talking biomechanics or we're talking functional medicine, if you have the basic fundamentals, and I told you this, like fucking, I drilled this into every single week and everyone else in the mentorship, the 3 things, which was anatomy, physiology, and biomechanics. It's like if you understand those 3 things, and then you take those raw ingredients, it's like baking a cake. It's like, cool, you understand that, you can program really effectively, whether it's a bodybuilder, a powerlifter, or someone trying to lose weight. Same sort of concept here. It's like if you understand, in this case, let's say it's more like biochemistry, pharmacology, toxicology, which are all just derivatives of biology, physiology, and chemistry. If you understand all those things really well, and then you look at a blood test, it's like everything starts to make sense and you look at it through a different lens. So I'd say fundamentally, if you want to get really good at this stuff, from a coach practitioner perspective, like nail your fundamentals of science. If you're not a coach practitioner, you're just like an everyday person, you're like, where do I start? It's a bit more challenging, I guess, but I guess, obviously just try and seek out a good coach or a good practitioner. Like I'd say, try not to, you're not going to learn this stuff overnight. Like it's taken 10 years and I still probably know 10% of what's out there. So I'd say if you're an everyday person, you just want to seek a good practitioner, a good coach who can obviously help provide that process for you. Because unfortunately, there's not a lot of direct like courses in blood work or, like you mentioned, like, the courses or things on the optimal ranges. It's really just an amalgamation of people who are at a high level in the functional medicine, holistic health space, who have had years of clinical experience and data and have put all those numbers together based off what they see as optimal, which for some people listening, the evidence-based crowd, they're probably going to get their pitchforks out because it's like, oh, it's not, clinical evidence, but it's like there's different levels of evidence. Like there's obviously, you got your evidence in terms of randomized controlled trials and the stuff you read on PubMed. But then you've also got to acknowledge if you had people in the industry who've been working for 30, 40, 50 years and they're worth thousands of people and they're seeing consistent patterns of this is what people who, have the highest levels of health, HRV, lowest heart rate, best VO2 max, like metrics that correlate with the blood work, versus these are the people that have chronic disease, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. Like there are clear patterns there, and I can attest to this. I've read over 2,000 blood tests in the last year, and the same things keep coming up, and the people that are in that space or demographic who are sick and have disease versus the people who are performing at a high level. So massive tangent, I guess, but I'd say, if you're a practitioner, nail your physiology, biology, biochemistry. If you're an everyday person, I'd say probably don't waste your time trying to learn it because it's so in depth, but try and find a good practitioner or coach who can facilitate the process and give you that peace of mind that when you are getting your blood test done or you are doing any assessments, like you're being compared against the optimal, you're not being compared against the average. Because fun fact, while we're on there, like the whole reason we have these big discrepancies in the reference ranges is there was a study 2022, so 3 years ago now, so it's probably worse by now because Australia's not getting healthier. 61.7% of people in Australia were living with at least one chronic disease. Massive. So now think of this. If you were to try and generate the averages to get like the normal data, and you had 100 people go get a blood test, obviously the way we're going to extract the averages is like we're going to take the results of the 100 people, and then we're going to create a high and a low end based off the pool of data that we have of those people. Make sense? And then from that, we're going to create a bell curve, which is, if you're in the middle, you're normal. If you're one standard deviation out, you're sort of abnormal. If you're two standard deviations out, you're probably close to dead in terms of this context. But if we are basing that data off 100 people, and we know of that 100 people, 62 of them are sick, what do you think the data is going to look like?
Skewed as fuck.
Yeah. So but now you come along. How old were you? 24. Josh comes along, 24, jacked, probably doesn't have a shirt on, straight from the gym, and he's like, "Hey, I want to get my blood test done. I don't feel too good. I'm really struggling to recover. My cognitive function is really bad. Blah blah blah. I want to get my testosterone checked." And then they compare you, 24, wanting to be healthy, wanting to be here, peak performance, against the average of a sick population. Doesn't really make much sense, and that's the biggest difference, I guess, in a nutshell. Like, well, they call functional blood work, which kind of sounds like a bit of a woo-woo term, functional blood work, but it's like, what real blood work should be, comparing you against optimal ranges for peak performance longevity versus what they do in the medical system, which is really just, trying to manage / prevent disease. So it's just setting the bar really, like, there's a difference between being healthy and not being sick.
Yeah, I like that.
Like, one of my mentors said to me, it's like, because if you're not broke, does that make you rich?
Yeah. I've never actually heard of like someone like using that as a reference thing. That's fucking, I'm sure that'll actually hit hard for a lot of people, because it's exactly that. And like, I know it myself, I've dealt with the medical system. I'm very, very fortunate. I've got a good doctor, but I've also got access to some pretty fucking good people within the industry for a lot of the things, if I ever need it, dive deeper and things like that. One of the things you mentioned right at the very start of that sort of tangent that we went on was you've been doing this for 10 years and still reckon you probably know about 10% of what's out there. And that in itself, for anybody who's listening at home, that in itself should tell you that if you have some person who is sprouting that they know every single fucking thing there is to know, and they can help you no matter the problem, no matter the thing, it's probably not the person for you. Probably a little bit of a witch doctor scenario going on there, where I've heard, and the best thing about that is I've spoken to a couple of people now, even within this podcast and just in general, some incredibly experienced people, some people who've been around for decades, who say similar things. They have the same sentiments, like the bottom of the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah,
they know that they have so much to learn, and you've got these people who are just the peak of it. They've done a weekend course on how to read blood work, and they might have done a uni degree on something. And then all of a sudden they're like, I know everything. I can fix you no matter what the problem is. I can do it all. Blah, blah, fucking blah. Like, I am the man for the job.
It's a massive industry trend right now. It's huge.
I feel like it trends in every sort of little section of the industry. Like, we've seen it. We see it in nutrition. We see it in training. We see it in hybrid athletes and all the other shit that trends at different times. Like, all of a sudden High Rock starts trending, and now we have full High Rocks dedicated gyms because they're experts that have done maybe a High Rocks themselves and whatever, That's a poor example, but it is an example of what, these things sort of happen. And within that as well, you started to touch on a couple of the metrics that you look for, you're looking at, and things like that. And there was a few there that were like a hell of a lot deeper than I'm sure some people have probably heard of before, because even from a general base knowledge, most people probably don't even know their resting heart rate. Let's be realistic. They don't know their fucking resting heart rate, let alone, as I think you mentioned in there, HRV, VO2 max, all of these other things. Can you give us like a little bit of an insight into maybe some of the more, what you would classify as base level metrics to look at, and just like a little bit of an information based on what they actually are?
Yeah, you can do that. Can you still see me?
Yep.
So that's the screen. Yeah, so I mean, there's some basic ones, and then I'd say they're all pretty basic. People who probably haven't really heard of them, but everyone can definitely do them in the sense of like they're not tests or things that you have to be some elite athlete and spend thousands of dollars on. So, I mean, I always think my approach is very rooted in science and physiology. I'm very systems focused, probably slightly autistic, and I like data. So to me, I like things that are like, when you're in high school and you do math, and it's like math is great because it's like it's right or it's wrong. Versus in English, it's like very opinion based. So like I try and treat it the same in health. It's like I want to know, are we trending right or are we trending wrong? Like we need to know what's going on. So the 4 markers that are really useful for that are going to be your vital signs. So essentially, we've got, and you can track all these with an Oura ring. So heart rate or resting heart rate. So this is what is your heart rate upon waking. So first thing in the morning, i.e. at rest. Second one is heart rate variability, which I can discuss in a minute. Respiratory rate, which is basically how many breaths you take in a minute. Fun fact on respiratory rate, average respiratory rate in 1920 was 8 to 12 breaths per minute. In 2020, the average is 20 breaths per minute. So we're breathing more breaths per minute, which when your heart rate elevates and you're in a more sympathetic state, think when you're stressed, what do? When you're relaxed, you breathe slow and deep. So another fun fact of why there might be increase in disease, sympathetic nervous system dominance, whole another conversation, but that's a fun fact and something that people can monitor, and something simple you can assess with people when you have your initial consultation. Now, you don't ask them because then they obviously change their breathing, but it's like if you're just having a conversation, you can kind of just get a gauge and see how many breaths they take, look at their chest, don't be a weirdo about it, it's there, but you can kind of see what's this person's natural breathing cadence like at rest. And if they're breathing 15, 20 a minute, it's like, well, rather than supplements and nutrition and all this other stuff, maybe we can just give this person some down regulation breathing to switch their body into more of a parasympathetic state. If we can do that and change them from being sympathetic 80% of the day to 50% of the day, it's a 30% improvement in parasympathetic tone, which is when their body's going to heal, rest, digest, grow, repair. That's going to be massive compared to any supplement or peptide or breathwork or ice bath or sauna or all that kind of shit. And I love all that stuff. But yeah, tangent, come back. So respiratory rate, heart rate variability, known as HRV, body temperature. And then the 5th one we can put in there is blood pressure. And yeah, most people listening to this podcast are probably going to be like, what the hell are half those things? But that's the concerning thing. It's like, this should be just common knowledge. Everyone should be tracking these things. Doesn't have to be meticulously, but like should be tracking these things or somewhat aware of it. And, you know, if I'd say even in my work, every time I work with someone asks, when was the last time you had your blood pressure taken? It's usually, they look at me like I've got 2 heads. But that's one of the easiest markers to be assessing, what's your overall health like of your body internally. Not just how you look, but yeah, we can look good. And you would know this, like in the bodybuilding powerlifting space, a lot of people look jacked and look great, but they've got the worst bloods, the worst health markers I've seen. And, you know, they look sexy and they look good externally, but, their internal biological health is terrible. So there's some markers that we can track. And then I guess some more advanced things. I wouldn't call them advanced, but I use them a lot in the longevity space if you're wanting to get into that space, which is a VO2 max test. And a VO2 max test in simple terms is basically just how well your body uses oxygen when you're working hard, like during intense exercises. So basically it shows how fit our cardiovascular respiratory system is. And the fun fact is the higher your VO2 max, there's a direct correlation to longevity or increased lifespan. So if you're in the top 2.5 percentile, you have a 5 times lower risk of death versus if you're in the lowest quartile. So in English, if you're in the top 2.5%, you have a 5 times less chance of all-cause mortality, so all for those bad metabolic diseases. If you're in the lowest 25%, you have a 5 times higher risk. Pretty cool metric. So it's not just, people see the test. It's the one where you've got the face oxygen mask on, you're on the treadmill. It's only for elite athletes and sprinters. No, it's a pretty good metric to know if you're going to die at 60 or die at 100. So we can use it with your everyday people. It's $100 test, go to a physio clinic, get it done. And again, that's something you could consistently measure every quarter, every 6 months, every 12 months to know you trend in the right direction.
Yeah.
And then the last one is DEXA scan. DEXA scan is a body composition scan. Kind of like when you go to F45. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Kind of like when you go to gyms that won't be named. You might do the in-body. I shouldn't have said names again. Here, now, fuck it. And you use one of those in-body scans and you hold the little things and it tells you your body fat percentage, and everyone apparently is 8% body fat and shredded. So they're super inaccurate. But a DEXA scan is like the gold standard. They use it from a medical perspective for bone density. Bone density, also a super useful metric for longevity, especially as you start to get older. If you're working with older population who have higher risks of bone fractures, falls. If you have a fall and you're over the age of 60, your chance of mortality goes through the roof. So it starts to become more of a problem later on. But what you can see on a DEXA scan is body fat percentage, visceral fat, and muscle mass. And we know that sarcopenia or loss of muscle mass is directly negatively correlated to longevity and lifespan. So maintaining muscle mass throughout your lifespan is going to be protective. And then high levels of visceral fat is going to be associated with all those metabolic diseases we talked about. So cardiovascular disease, diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, all those kind of things. So when I have clients, I make them do the whole thing. I don't make them, I encourage it. But like, having those metrics that we can track on a sort of a day-to-day or weekly basis with something like an Oura ring or a Whoop band or a polar chest strap, something like that. And you can be tracking those things to understand how your body's acutely responding to stress. If we change your program, if you change your nutrition, if you change your supplements, like we want to go, if we're changing the input, we want to see, is there change in the output? Otherwise, we're just kind of throwing random shit at a wall and hoping it sticks. So having those metrics on a more acute basis every day, every week, every month allows us to make better decisions and optimize recovery on a micro level. And then on a macro level, having the tests like the VO2 and the DEXA is more of a, I wouldn't say that's useful short term, but it's more just like, cool, big picture every 90 days or 6 months, like has that program that we've been doing been effective at reducing visceral fat, improving muscle mass, improving bone density, improving your cardiovascular capacity, which would then indirectly mean that you're going to have better body composition, better metabolic function. You're probably going to have better energy. You're probably going to have better thyroid function. Like all the things that people want, all the diseases they're dealing with are going to get better if we change the input.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the fucking... I remember getting one of those scans years and years and years ago when I worked at a gym, and I was apparently 3.2% body fat. I was like, mate, I'm shredded to the gills. This is phenomenal. I was not 3.2% body fat by any means of the imagination. That's for fucking damn sure.
Well, DEXA will humble you.
Yeah, well, we had one of the DEXAs at uni, and it was really cool just to see like that data just presented in just a different way. Obviously, we were taught, about the different metrics to use and everything like that as well. VO2 max, we did one of those at uni too, and that was hard. That was very hard. I was not fit at that standard. I was definitely in the lowest percentile you could think of, which was not good. But you were talking there in relation to, like, you've mentioned Whoop, you mentioned the Oura Ring, etc. No, let's be realistic. It's 2025. Cost of living is fucking pretty expensive for most people.
Yeah.
You already mentioned it before. Like, if you can afford to get your own blood test, you save one coffee a week, 6 months, there's your blood test sorted. For people who are looking at this sort of stuff, and I do believe sometimes people genuinely do want to make a change. There's just absolutely is going to be some sort of financial limitation within that. Like there has to be for some people, right?
Yeah.
Where is, like, I've got an Apple Watch. I know it's not the most accurate thing in the fucking world, but I've had this Apple Watch now for 7 years.
Yeah.
So it's inaccurate, but it's probably a fairly consistent inaccuracy by this point in time, considering it's been on my wrist almost every single day for 7 years straight. Where is, if the best place is like resting heart rate, HRV, etc., what is your first recommendation to somebody who may not be able to afford like an Oura Ring or something along those lines, just to try and actually start to take their health into their own hands?
I mean, at the end of the day, you don't need the data. Like, you know what you should be doing. I'd say if you had to buy one thing, it would be do the blood test, because then that's going to give you direction on like what are your deficiencies, what's actually happening in your body, so then you can make changes. Like if you took my Oura Ring away tomorrow, I don't need to know my resting heart rate and my HRV to like I understand how I feel. So like it is cool because it's like having data makes you make better decisions, creates awareness. I think that's the two benefits of the Oura Ring. It's like it just creates the awareness is the main thing. Like if I wake up and my HRV is terrible and I'm meant to train today, but I feel good, I'm not going to train my Oura. So like I don't let it dictate my life, but like I understand the awareness. And over time, I'm like, I can understand that these patterns of like when I eat this food or when I go to bed late or when I do this, like I can see how my health changes. So I think the biggest benefit of having gadgets are like it just helps create education, awareness through experience and repetition. But if you took it away, like you could still get that. You just wouldn't have as much data, which if you're someone who's new to the health space might be confusing because you can't really understand your body, and we all know how you feel is not necessarily accurate sometimes. Like when you think a squat is RPE 8 and then you watch a video back and you're like, I'm a little bit bitch, I had 5 more reps, like same sort of concept. So I think, yeah, it's useful. But if it was like, hey, I just genuinely can't afford to have any of this stuff, I'd say blood test would be the priority. If you can't afford the blood test, go to the doctor and just do your best. I have a free like referral template on my Instagram, which is basically like, here's what you should request. Look, to be honest, you're probably going to get 50% of it if you're lucky, but still better than nothing. Something's better than nothing at the end of the day. When it comes to gadgets, yes, Oura is amazing, gold standard. If you're someone who's like, my health and longevity is my number one priority, and you want a health tracker, not a fitness tracker, biggest difference between Whoop and Oura is, Whoop is Definitely not as accurate as Aura. Definitely doesn't give you as much insights, but it's great if you're someone who's like, I want to use it for CrossFit or high rocks. But if you're like, I don't really care about what's happening when I'm training, I just want to know what my health's like 24 hours a day, then Aura is your number one. Aura is expensive though. I actually found something the other day on Kogan.com.
I've seen these. I have seen these
Have a
recently.
knockoff Aura. And
Yes.
it's spelled with an A rather than a U. So if you did want to knock off Aura, they're about $100, which again might be more cost effective. I have got a few clients in my coaching programs who are in the same boat. Like, Dan, I'd love to do it, but I just can't justify spending $500 in a ring. I'm like, hey, cool, absolutely fine. I'm like, you want to be a guinea pig? Try this. Let me know how it goes. And yeah, to be honest, I don't know if it's going to be as accurate, but it's one of those things where if you buy a scale that's 2 kilos out and you use the same scale every day, it's always 2 kilos out. So it's still going to give you some awareness and education. So I think there's always something you can do. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just progression over perfection and trying to do something that's going to move the needle forward. So I guess to wrap that up, it would be get your blood test. That's number one priority. Make that happen. So then you can make smarter decisions around nutrition, supplements, training, recovery. If you have capacity to get some sort of health gadget, awesome, do it. If you already have an existing health gadget, again, like just use what you've got. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but it's still going to give you some awareness.
Yep.
Absolute worst case scenario, there's an app called Sleep Cycle that people can download. Yeah, it's free. They might have made like a paid version that's like $3 or something, but I haven't used it in a long time. But what you used to be able to do was when you woke up first thing in the morning, you put your fingertip on the phone
to see your resting heart rate.
Yeah, it'll do your resting heart rate. Again, no, it's probably not.
Still does that.
Yeah, so that's like you can get some sleep insights and you can get resting heart rate, which from a physiology point of view, resting heart rate and HRV are on opposite ends of the spectrum. So when your nervous system is in a sympathetic state, i.e. you feel stressed, heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, respiratory rate goes up, HRV goes down. When you are in a parasympathetic state, the opposite thing happens. So if you know what your resting heart rate is, then you can kind of figure out, well, my nervous system's going this direction or that direction. If you wake up and your resting heart rate's 80 and it's normally 60, okay, pretty good indication that your HRV is probably going to be shit. You don't have the actual metric, but you know it's going to be shit because they're on a feedback loop. So yeah, I think that's it. That could be a good start if you like absolutely need something for free.
Yeah, I love that. And anyone who is listening, I've used Sleep Cycle now for, I think mine's like 8 years. I think I got it when it first came out, like so fucking long ago now. And they've just made update after update. I think once a year they do a sale where you pay $10 a year for the pro version for the entirety of the year.
There you go.
It gives you all these different metrics. They've just updated it more so recently to reflect similar structures to Whoop, to Aura, etc. So like when you're in deep sleep cycle, when you're in REM sleep, etc., they do use the microphone if you have it laying next to your bed. It's probably not the most accurate thing in the world sometimes, but again, as Dan said, if it scales 2 kilos out and you use the same scale every single time, it's always going to be 2 kilos out. If you have an Apple Watch, yes, it might not be the most accurate thing in the world, but as I've had the same Apple Watch for 7 years, it's probably pretty fucking consistently inaccurate by this point, considering it's only me wearing it. So I think that in itself is a really good thing, because I know that it can become very overwhelming for people, especially when it comes to all this sort of health stuff, that they might just be like, oh, fuck it, it's too hard to do all of this. It's too hard to fix everything. It's too hard to try and get on top of it. And within that as well, you were talking about HRV. I think you kind of briefly touched on it, but HRV, do you want to just explain to people what that exactly is?
Yeah, so HRV stands for heart rate variability, and the easiest way to explain it is if you've ever been in hospital before, or you've ever just seen like an ECG, so the fancy screen where you see someone's heartbeat, and it's like boop, and then there's a space, and then there's a heartbeat, boop. The time in between the two beats, there's a delay in between the heartbeats, and they measure that in milliseconds. Now, heart rate variability is the time between beats. So on average, and don't go too much into math, everyone's like, no math. If your heart beats 60 times in a minute and there's 60 seconds in a minute, logically, how many times is your heartbeat per second? You think so. However, there's variability between the beats. So it might be beep, and then there's 0.8 of a second, and then boop, boop, and then there's 1.2 seconds, boop, boop, and then there's 0.77 seconds, boop, boop. So there's variations between how frequently your heart beats. And so basically, if we look at all your heartbeats over a minute, and then we look at the average in between each beat, and then we take the average of that, then we're going to get a score, and that's going to be your heart rate variability, and it's measured in milliseconds. Now, the higher your heart rate variability, in milliseconds, the more your nervous system has is sort of in like your parasympathetic tone or in your parasympathetic part of the nervous system. So I think parasympathetic nervous system is where your body's like calm, resilient, adaptable. Sympathetic is like we're stressed. So higher HRVs means your nervous system is more adaptable to stress, more resilient. You're going to handle what's thrown at you a lot more effectively. You're going to recover faster, and basically, you're going to be healthier. Versus if you had a lower HRV, it means you're going to be less resilient to stress. You're probably going to recover poorer, and you'll notice lower HRV in pretty much every single negative health condition out there. So HRV is a really, really good metric for understanding a person's state of their nervous system and also their overall health.
Perfect.
And it's directly correlated to, so when I said before about the two different parts of the nervous system and the way they're all linked together. So like low HRV, high resting heart rate, or the flip side would be low resting heart rate, high HRV, which is what we want to see. That would be indicative that your nervous system is calm, relaxed, it's adapting well to the stress. And you can use this in terms of your programming. So if you're programming for someone, and let's say they're in an intensification block for their upcoming powerlifting comp, and their resting HRVs normally sitting at 100, and then you notice in, consistently multiple days or weeks in a row, they're sitting at like 50 or 60, pretty good indication that, hey, right now, the amount of stress on that person's system as a whole, systemically, is exceeding their capacity to recover. And we potentially want to look at, well, can we reduce the stress, i.e. the training volume intensity, or can we add in some extra things to promote parasympathetic tone? Maybe it's doing saunas, maybe it's doing breath work, maybe it's bumping their calories up or increasing their sleep, etc. So looking at the trends is a good way to understand, is that person responding favorably to the stress imparted on them? And that's looking at stress holistically from their entire life.
Yeah, I like that. And with HRV then, first, so this is a question that I have looked at myself over the years. I've had, looked at a couple of different things, but someone like myself, ADHD, etc. Is there a correlation between HRV still not being great with someone with ADHD or something along those lines, but their resting heart, like even if they have gotten fitter? So my resting heart rate's my resting heart rate has gone up and down over the years as I've put on size, dropped size, etc. But HRV has just never been that great. Is that something you've seen yourself, where somebody who might come in and they've got ADHD or they've got something along those lines, or ASD or something like that, where their HRV is still just not great despite the fact that they're getting fitter or more conditioned or even less stressed, etc.?
I haven't read anything directly, but I've noticed it anecdotally, like with a lot of clients who have, it's a they're neurosplasy, what we call them, ADHD, autism, those kind of things. So, I mean, ADHD is going to be associated naturally with more sympathetic dominance. So, that is going to drive that pathway in the sense of like, I think sympathetic dominance means you're more sympathetic driven, you spend more time in your sympathetic nervous system. So that's going to have the opposite effect of having high HRV. So high HRV will generally be an indication that your body's more parasympathetic in nature. So yeah, that's just sort of a correlation I've noticed with clients. But I mean, I don't think it's like a black and white thing because I mean, I'd say I definitely, fit into the ADHD category, but I also have gone through periods where my HRV has been like back in 2020 when I was going through my own health conditions and things that got me into what I'm doing today. My HRV was like averaging 30 to 40. And then now my HRV, sort of averages anywhere from like 120 to 150. So I don't think, which is, like you say fuck now, but it's like back then I would have said fuck because it's like, that's so big. But then I have I've got 5 years of data now to know like, all right, well, when I feel good, it's usually between like anything above 80, I'm feeling good. Anything above 120, I'm like, I'm going to crush today and anyone in my way. And then anything sort of below that, like 60 is usually where it's like, okay, you've been cooking it too hard, maybe, pull back a bit or look at what you're doing. So I think having that data is useful to make those decisions. I understand like on acute level as also macro level. But I think even if you do have some sort of condition or some circumstance, like your ceiling might be limited. The same as like you're never going to be an elite level sprinter if you don't have the right genetics, but it doesn't mean you still can't reach your maximum potential, but maybe your HRV potential and my HRV potential might be different. And you see that, like I've had some elite athletes who are like way fitter than I am, and their average HRV is anywhere from like 30 to 40. I had one guy a few years ago, it was my first like elite athlete client. And it was a real eye opener because When he was feeling shit, it was like 15. When he was feeling great, it was like 50. And I was like, how? When I'm feeling terrible, I'm 50. When you're feeling great, you're 50. And you're like 10 times fitter than me. This doesn't make sense. Because when you first read up about HIV in the textbooks, it's like, it was an absolute number. It was like, it had to be between 80 to 120. That was the gold standard. Versus what we know now, and what I've known through both evidence and literature, but also from like just working with people is, everyone has their sort of goalposts of like what's low and what's high. And regardless of where your goalposts start, over time, what you want to do is shift your goalposts to the right, which would be if you and me spoke today, and let's say your HIV is like 50 on a bad day and 80 on a good day. In 12 months' time, I want your bad day to now be your good day. I want your low to be 80 and your high to be 120. And that would mean that over the last 12 months, your nervous system has become more resilient to stress. You've increased that stress tolerance capacity, and your overall, I guess, metabolic health is a lot better.
Yeah, look, I'm definitely no elite athlete, but I'm probably fairly similar to that previous client of yours. Bad days around 15 to 20, good days like 50. If I hit 50 to 60, like I'm mint. I'm stress free that day. I'm feeling fucking fantastic.
That's what you use as well, I'd say, because I find a lot of people who use Apple Watches and Garmin's always give them lower scores than when they use Auras. So I think there's also some variation between gadgets. But yeah, as long as you know your goalposts on this, if it's measured on the same gadget for the same person consistently, you've got your reference ranges.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it probably is for sure. And I'm sure, I've looked into Aura rings and things like that in the past. I might even have a look at the Kogan one and just fucking get it just to see what it does. But I think as something you've touched on quite a few times now, every time we've sort of looked, anytime you've spoken about anything so far, you've always keep coming back to like finding someone's optimal. Like your differentiation is your difference is going to be different to someone else's. Your level of variance is going to be, potentially higher. You might have less stress than the average person, or more stress, or whatever the case might be. And even when we were discussing blood tests and everything like that at the start, and we were like, okay, cool, we want to reference off of what an optimal level is, not just the fucking average, because as you said, 62 out of 100 people are going to be sick or have a chronic disease or something along those lines. That just is fucking wild to me to actually think that that's the case, because it makes sense, because the average is a fucking shit house. Averages are so shit.
Think about 10 people in your close circle, probably not your close circle because you're like pretty fit, but like say maybe like your family, for example. It's like think about 10 family members, like I guarantee 6 of them are overweight.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, I can see that.
Unless you're a really fit family. But yeah, so it's pretty common when you think about it. Like just walk around the streets, go to Coles and Woolies now. Maybe not on Gold Coast because everyone's fit, but walk around the street and you'll start seeing it. It's like the yellow car.
Could probably go to a few different suburbs and find some if I wanted to. Away from the beach, anything away from the beach, I find is like it's just a different Gold Coast. But we kind of briefly touched on it scattered in throughout there as well, but with relation to recovery modalities. So you kind of briefly mentioned saunas and ice baths and everything like that. So from your end, in relation to like recovery tools, if somebody has, they're fucking a little bit stressed, their resting heart rate is high, HIV is tanked, etc., and they want to shift their nervous system a little bit, what are some of the better options that they can select out of those sort of different modalities?
Yeah, I would say after 30 days of consistently having 8 to 9 hours sleep, not 7 to 8, because we'll go into that and I will answer the question, but I think like people need to hear this because I love my biohacking shit, but I also, a lot of people that when they first come to work with me, they'll have massive dysfunction in their body, and that could be nutrient deficiencies, inflammation, sleep debt, whatever. But at the end of the day, think about if you're trying to build muscle, you need a calorie surplus. Yeah, so you wouldn't be in a calorie deficit. If you've been in a calorie deficit for so long, it's like it's created a lot of strain, a lot of stress on your body, and you usually need to have a proper, refeed or a proper what's the word I'm looking for?
Diet break, etc.
Not diet break. Well, it's the technical term I'm looking for. When you do the opposite.
Mate, I'm lost as well. So this is perfect.
We should not do this on a Friday afternoon. But if you've been time doing like a deep deficit, and then you're obviously trying to rebuild your calories over time. I can't remember what the technical term is, but rebuild your calories over time.
Reverse.
Yeah, reverse diet. That's one. Fire out. What's the opposite of the other way?
Yeah. Reverse.
Yeah, so obviously you have to spend a period of time reverse dieting, trying to build your metabolism back up because you've created such a significant amount of stress in that like 12-week period of like going ham on your diet. Same concept when it comes to sleep. People have had sleep debt. Most people sleep on average, 6 to 6.5 hours a night. They've been doing this for months and years, and then they're like, oh, no, my sleep's all good. If you have really, really poor recovery, before you look for the hack, I would say spend 30 days sleeping 8 to 9 hours because the average human might need 7 hours at baseline. If you've spent years and months below baseline, you now have to get the baseline, but you also need to make up the debt that you've accumulated over the time. You also need to factor in that your body's not just trying to maintain, it's trying to heal because you have a deficiency. And healing is the same as hypertrophy. Healing requires a surplus of energy in the form of food, energy in the form of sleep. So I'd say the biggest thing that people should be doing, first of all, they're trying to heal some sort of like chronic disease or chronic inflammation or some sort of symptom, would be get a surplus of sleep and get a surplus of calories. Not excessive and go eat donuts and pizza, but like bump your calories up, stop being scared of food. If you're in a deficit or you're at maintenance, bump it up to 10%. And then same thing with sleep. You need maintenance. If you are perfectly healthy and you're optimal, 7 hours of sleep is fine. If you're not perfectly healthy and optimal, then you need to have the minimum amount plus 10, 20% more. So sleeping 8 to 9 hours, bumping your calories up to 10% plus maintenance. And then the third one would be doing some breath work. And I'm not talking, go and do like 60-minute breath works and cry and break down and, sort of Burley style stuff. I'm talking more so like just getting that that respiratory rate down. And no shade, I've done my fair share of breathwork stuff, but like I'm talking more so if you have that person whose resting heart rate is elevated and their respiratory rate is also going to be elevated, if we can shift them into more parasympathetic state with doing some sort of more down regulating breathwork. So I'm talking box breathing, I'm talking physiological sigh, even just some sit and meditation and just breathe and just do slow exhales. Those three things in isolation for 30 days, it will be better than any biohack, any ice bath, any sauna, anything you can do. So do that first. Then, once you've done that, I guess what would you say the main popular ones I'd say is sauna, ice baths. They're probably the two biggest ones that get thrown around, and then obviously supplements and peptides and things like that. So I'd say when it comes to things that are useful, all of them are useful in the right time for the right person, in the right dose, in the right circumstance. Ice baths, probably 90% of the population don't need to be doing them. Their nervous systems are already jacked up, already cooked. And it's just creating more stress. I think they're an amazing tool once you've kind of overcome that acute stress. And it's like, again, if I looked at it as phases with people, the first sort of 3 months I work with most people, it's like calming down stress, getting them more parasympathetic, addressing nutrient deficiencies, reducing inflammation, getting into good habits. Once they've built a base level of resilience, then we could introduce something like cold therapy. But probably not the right thing for a lot of people as like day one, you're already stressed from work, training, all these things. And now like, let's just chuck you in a freezing cold tub when you have no capacity to control your nervous system. So I think ice baths probably is overused at the wrong times, but amazing once you get to the capacity to do them. Sauna would be something I think everyone should have as a household item. Sauna is the best thing since sliced bread. If you can get yourself a sauna, again, obviously, might not be feasible. There's a lot of cost-effective ones now where you can get them at home. They're not too expensive, a couple of grand to get an infrared sauna at home, and you can use it every night. If not, the gym has it sometimes. So, saunas anywhere from 2 to 4 times a week, roughly about 20 minutes if you're doing a traditional, because it's pretty hot, like that 80, 90 degree range. Or if you're doing an infrared sauna, generally about a 60 to 70 degree range, and for about 30 to 45 minutes because it takes a while to heat up. But that's going to be one of the best useful stresses. It's still a stressor on the body, so we still have to factor in dosages and overall stress with like all the other modalities you have in your life. Even though it's a good stress, it still is a stress. But that's a good tool that I'd say I would confidently prescribe to 99% of people as a recovery modality, both from the physical benefits, but also the mental benefits, metabolic benefits, like so many benefits to sauna. So if you had to pick one thing, it would be sauna after you're doing all the other things.
Sweet. I love that. And it's really, really interesting with the sleep. So let's quickly hone in on that for a second. So you've mentioned here like sleep debt, and that was actually something that you introduced to me in that mentorship years and years ago. It was something I'd never even thought about, not even heard of. It was just like, oh, if I had, I think we discussed around even myself, because my sleep was dog shit because I was working split shifts at the gym and the OG PT thing, right? Stupid hours, barely getting sleep, nap through the day, things like that, like trying to recover that sleep debt to help with recovery. Now, a lot of people, and I know a lot of people in this day and age, and now they could have a fucking lot of things to do with some of this stuff we've already discussed, but they struggle to sleep. They struggle to get to sleep, and they struggle to stay asleep. So if you have somebody who's come to you and the first thing you say to them, how many hours of sleep you get in a night? And they're like 7 to 8, but it's broken. I wake up through the night, or I struggle to get to sleep, or I wake up at fucking 3 a.m. wide awake, etc. What are some of the like lowest hanging fruit that you find works best with those people to just help them to actually just stay asleep a bit longer?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few subcategories there. Like struggling to fall asleep is more of a too wired issue. Waking up multiple times, which can be more of a quality issue. So let's just do. I'll give a general overview of like how improving sleep, and then we can kind of go deeper if you want. But I'd say first thing to know would be if you can get some sort of tracker like the sleep cycle tracker. I think the more information we have, the better, because then we can understand like, is it a quality issue or a quantity issue? Is it a latency issue? So, So I guess some of the metrics we'd look at would be sleep latency. So sleep latency is how long it takes you to get to sleep, and it should be anywhere between 5 to 15 minutes. So if you're falling asleep within 1 minute, you're the type of person that's like, then like generally that's because you're a bit overcooked. If it takes you, 20, 30 minutes to get sleep, it's generally going to mean, your nervous system's still quite wired, you're still very sympathetic, and you're kind of struggling to wind down again to that parasympathetic state where your body needs to be to go to sleep. So latency is a good thing to look at. Like, does it take you way too long to get to sleep? And if that's the case, then we need to look at a lot of things, which we'll come back to. The second thing would be looking at your quality, because you could sleep 8 hours, and this is where I think sleep total hours, like, can't talk about everything today, but I'd say like a simple answer would be total hours of sleep is kind of a shit metric, because it's about your quality of sleep. If you can sleep 6 hours and get 1.5 to 2 hours of deep sleep and REM sleep, then in my views, you've just been more efficient and you just got an extra 2 hours in your day, and you should get a gold star and a pat on the back. Yeah. Because when we look at the metrics for sleep, the way that they created the averages was that you should get between 15 to 25% of your sleep should come from deep and REM. And the average sleep, for a need for an adult is 8 hours. So if you do the math, 15 to 25% of 8 hours works out to be around 1 hour, 20 to 2 hours of deep sleep and REM sleep. So that's the deep sleep and REM sleep need for humans. Deep sleep is when we have physiological repair, and then REM sleep is when we have neurological repair. So I want to look at, okay, if you're getting 8 hours or 7 hours, but you're still tired, you're still groggy, you're still feeling shit, like, are you asleep, or are you just unconscious? Because there's two different things. Sleep is restorative. Being unconscious, your eyes are closed, but your body is still way too wide to do anything useful. So having something even like the sleep cycle app, like you mentioned, is pretty good. If it has updates, you might be able to see some of those things and go, hey, it's not an issue with this and getting to sleep, it's an issue with accessing deep sleep, or blah, blah, blah. So we really want to get specific on the diagnostic, because then the diagnostic will then determine the specific that I give them. But generally speaking, your sleep is less about what you do in the 90 minutes before bed and more about what you do in the first 90 minutes of waking up. So the moment you wake up is going to affect the moment you go to sleep. And that's what most people get wrong. They think like, oh, it's just, at 8 o'clock, I turn my lights off and I wind down, and then I magically fall asleep. Your sleep all comes down to circadian rhythm, which is basically our biological clock. How your body responds to light will then determine what hormones we release. Melatonin helps you fall asleep. Cortisol makes you wake up. So very simply put, when you wake up first thing in the morning, we should have a spike in cortisol. What helps with that is getting direct morning sunlight. It helps stimulate what's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus in our brain, which is an extension of our optic nerve. So when there's a light hits the eyes, stimulates the optic nerve, tells that part of our brain, hey, it's time to wake up, go produce cortisol. So then you start to wake up. Cortisol spikes early in the morning. You feel really energetic. You feel really good, amazing, good things are happening. But because it spikes early, it's also going to start to come down early. So cortisol should spike at 6 a.m. in the morning, and then it should start to come down at like 3 p.m. And then that's when melatonin should start to take over. Melatonin is a sleep hormone. So then melatonin spikes at like 9 p.m. And then you're ready to go to bed. If you don't get early morning sunlight, or you just kind of roll out of bed and you go straight to work, you're straight into a screen or a computer and artificial light and blue light and stuff like that, you don't really get that spike. The spike is delayed. And then because it gets delayed, it's going to come down delayed. And then you're trying to go to bed at 6 p.m. at night, you still got this really, really high level of cortisol, because all day you haven't got your morning sunlight. You've been smashing coffee all day, which is spiking cortisol. You're highly stressed. You're on emails. You're on screens. You're going to the gym. You're pumping weights. Like, you're basically just stimulating cortisol all day. and then you expect doing a 5-minute meditation is going to outdo the 6 hours of chaos you've done before that. So my advice would be non-negotiable, morning sunlight. If you can, if you live in Melbourne and it's winter, like unlucky, but like get morning sunlight. I'm from Melbourne, so I can have empathy, but you want to have morning sunlight as early as possible. And if you're, depending on where you are, it's going to be different times. If you have to go to work, people are like, oh, I have to go to work, I can't get morning sunlight. When it's 8 a.m. and you have your first lunch break, or your first, not lunch break, your first smoko or whatever you call it, go outside and get some sun. So as early as you can, get morning sunlight. That's going to help set your body's biological rhythm or your circadian rhythm. Second thing, caffeine. Caffeine's not the devil. Caffeine's amazing. Everyone's different. Without a genetic test, you don't really know how long your body takes to metabolize it. So I just go with the safe option, which is 8 hours on average. You should keep coffee away from when you want to go to bed. So having your last coffee at midday if you want to go to bed at 8 p.m. Having your last coffee at 2 p.m. if you want to go to bed at 10 p.m. Yeah. That's just a general rule. You might be someone who metabolizes faster or slower. You'll figure that out once you try and go to sleep that night. Okay. Next thing is you having your final meal at least 2 to 3 hours before bed. If you're having a meal too late before bed, your blood flow is redirecting away from the brain and going towards the gut to digest food. Less blood flow in the brain means you're going to have poor quality sleep, but also generally struggle to fall asleep because your body's trying to metabolize this food rather than allowing you to chill out and go to bed. So having your final meal 2 to 3 hours before bed is another one. And then light, again, is the big one. I mentioned light first thing in the morning is great because it helps stimulate. It's time to wake up. As soon as the sun goes down, we want to turn off all artificial lights, turn off all, sort of fluorescent lights in the house. So having things like salt lamps are really, really good. You can get those they're called Philips Hue, the ones that I've got, but they're like,
yep. There's
some cheap knockoff ones you can get from Kmart. Basically, you just play around with the timer and set up, when it's 5 p.m. I want the red lights to go on. It's like things like that where it's like, it doesn't have to cost you thousands of dollars. Just get yourself some salt lamps, get yourself some beeswax candles, get yourself some of those lights, create a really dull environment, get yourself some blue light blockers if you're going to be on computers or TV or laptops doing work and hustling, and just start to wind down, That's really as simple as it is. Obviously, there's more to it depending on the individual and what's going on. But I'd say at a base level, they're the things that you should be doing that you're not currently doing that might be hindering why you're finding it hard to fall asleep at night.
Fuck. I feel attacked on that. I feel attacked. It was like everything you were listing then. I was like, actually, you know what? But in saying that, the first thing I do try and do every single day is get out for sun. And I noticed that previously, obviously, being here on the Gold Coast, like sun rises at fucking 4 a.m., 4:30 during summer. It was great to be down the beach at that time because the sun was rising, no one else was there. But then as it's obviously gotten a bit colder and darker and everything like that, the sun's now not rising till around 6:30. So I essentially had to change like my whole structure of my day purely so I could get morning sun. Like that was the biggest thing for me. I changed every single thing in my day so I could get morning sun for that exact same reason. And obviously sunlight is something that you've mentioned from the very start of this chat with relation to even just people's general fucking health, because I think it is so severely underrated. And, had a bit of a dig at poor Melbourne, but yep, Melbourne sucks to suck sometimes because you don't have as much sunlight as anyone else does. But honestly, in saying that, like I know you got to go soon. So I fucking reckon that there in itself, like that little wrap up of sleep and just everything you've covered from that perspective has given a lot of things that people can actually take away. And you've covered everything from like people who have no financial means to be able to support like some of this stuff to people who maybe they do have the financial means and ways in which they can actually go and capitalize on this for health and things like that. So people can actually find you, and I'll put it all in the show notes and everything like that. Do you just want to give yourself a little bit of a plug, business, Instagram, how they find you, how they get in contact, etc.?
Yeah, sure. One last thing I was going to say just on the sleep thing too is something to consider if you're doing all the right things and you're still having problems with your sleep. I said before about melatonin being your sleep hormone. Everyone knows about melatonin. One of the worst things you can do is take melatonin, so don't do it. But what you need to consider too is serotonin is a precursor to melatonin. Serotonin is one of our 4 main neurotransmitters. You got dopamine, makes you feel good, focus, drive, motivation, serotonin, emotional regulation, bowel motility. So low serotonin, constipation is common. And the third thing that serotonin is responsible for is a precursor, i.e. it's like the building blocks of melatonin. And melatonin's our go to sleep hormone. So a big correlation I find with people who have unresolved gut issues, and that I mean how do you know if you got a gut issue? If you have bloating, you have food sensitivities, intolerances, you got gas, you got constipation, diarrhea, bowel pain, those kind of things. So if you do have any of those symptoms and you also have poor sleep, then I would definitely look into your gut health. First thing to do would be a blood test. Second thing to do, if you have the means to do so, would be a stool test, which is like very specific just to understand what's happening. And then addressing those things can significantly improve your sleep. Because fun fact, over 95% of your serotonin is produced in your small intestine. So if there's problems in your small intestine, you're not producing much serotonin, which means you don't have the precursor, the building blocks for melatonin. And that could be something that's missing if you're doing all the right things and it's still not getting better. But I'll stop there. Otherwise, I'll keep going. But yeah, in terms of where to find me, I'm pretty useless with like technology and shit. So just Instagram at Dr Daniel is the best place to find me. And if you are curious on blood work and getting your bloods looked at and compared against optimal reference ranges versus the average reference ranges, and you have experienced everything we talked about today, if you go to the link in the bio, there's a free blood work analysis offer there. So essentially, you just provide your own blood test, pay for the blood test, send the results, analyze them, send you like a 5-minute video telling you what areas there are for improvement. No caveats, no tricks, just some feedback, and then at least you got some clarity on where you're at.
There you go. That you literally, if anybody's listening to this and they're sitting there going, "Oh, financially, I can't do it," you've just lost all financial. That's if you're going to have an expert be able to actually read them and give you some feedback on that information, like it's invaluable at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned. Especially if you're actually serious about looking after your health.
100%.
Now, before you quickly shoot off, I'll make this as quick as possible. There's 3 questions I like to ask every single guest. Throw these in right at the end just to really keep you on your toes. Start us off. If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
Probably say chill out a bit, eh? There's no rush. Probably the biggest one. I probably still tell that to myself sometimes. But yeah, probably just chill out. You don't have to get it, just don't be in a rush to get things done, and enjoy the process a bit more.
Our second question, and I think I might know the answer to this one, but favorite animal?
You think you might know it? I don't even think I know it. What do you think it is?
I was just going to... Most people normally just say whatever pet they have, so I just thought for sure.
No, he's definitely not my favorite. He was not my first choice. I wanted a golden retriever and ended up with a dachshund. But we love him regardless. The first one that came to mind was an alligator. They're pretty cool. They're
okay.
Yeah. Strong. They're also terrifying.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, cool. That's a fucking different answer. I like it.
Crocodile, I guess, yeah.
I mean, we're Australians, so crocodile works better. Yeah. I'm pretty sure crocodiles are actually more lethal than alligators too.
Alligators are pussies. They're like the small, long, skinny beaks. You want like the big chompers. Like
and if I have learnt correctly, alligators are less likely to attack unprovoked, whereas crocodiles don't give a fuck. They will just go hard at anything and everything.
Maybe test it.
Yeah. Probably not the first test I'll be doing. Last but not least, before we quickly wrap up, what does strength mean to you?
Your capacity to get punched in the face and keep going.
Across all areas.
Across all areas. I mean, yeah, I wasn't sure. Do you mean like physical strength or you just mean like strength as a human?
That's the whole premise behind this podcast is strength across all planes, from physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, etc. What does strength mean to you? Because it means something different to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, all piss take aside, I think, like it's still, it is relevant. Like, I think, like your ability to endure and be faced with challenges, physical, emotional, mental, whatever they may be, and have the capacity to push through them regardless and keep moving forward. Which I'd call, I probably mixed up resilience and strength, but like, yeah, to me, they're similar concepts. Like.
As I said, I think my favorite thing about asking that question is that everybody's definition is slightly different, right? Like it means a little bit different to everybody, and the way in which they interpret it is still their own personal identification, and that's why I like asking that question.
A good quote on that one is like, don't wish that you had an easier life, wish that you were better, and live an easy life now, live a hard life later, live a hard life now, live an easier life later. I like that because it's like encapsulating that resilience of like do hard shit and then later on get the benefit.
There you fucking go. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Well,
Cool.
sir, thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate your time. I know this was we planned this like a month ago now, so this has been a
You
long
got that.
time in the works. I do appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man. And everybody at home, if you have any other further questions or anything like that, you can message myself, message Dan, jump on, go get your bloods, fucking send it through, get analysis, start the process to your best healthy self.
Elite, thanks for having me, bro.
Perfect.